been going through a segment talking about each position group for the last 8 weeks. Tonight, we land on the quarterback position. We feel as a fan base, I would assume that the team feels good, the coaching staff feels good about where you stand right now at quarterback, especially with your starter. You know, there's something, and Miles Brennan taught us this more than anybody. A fan base will latch on to a quarterback that will sit and wait their time. Right? Like, there is no question whatsoever that we will, as a fan base, rally around the guy that wants to be here, very talented. We want them to be great. That is what Nussmeier is. It's what Matt Flynn was. It's what Miles Brennan was hoping everybody thought that he would be. But Garrett Nussmeier comes into his 4th season at LSU, getting a chance late in the season in his freshman year. Then Brian Kelly comes in, doesn't waver, doesn't transfer. Miles Brennan comes out of the transfer portal, comes back to LSU, and then you go and get which would potentially be, or not potentially be, which would be the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in Jaden Daniels out of the transfer portal. Did Brian Kelly win the SEC? So many questions. But Garrett Nussmeier came back and sat behind Jaden for the last 2 years when in year 1, Jaden won the West, and then in year 2 when he won the Heisman. I think Garrett, as it stands today, is by far one of the more talented quarterbacks in the entire SEC. There is a laundry list of really good quarterbacks in this league and a lot of guys that have had playing time, you know, and in no even real particular order. You know, I look at Brady Cook at Missouri. I look at Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. I look at Carson Beck at Georgia. What is Brock Vandagriff going to do at Kentucky? Jalen Milroe led Alabama to the playoff last year. Even though Billy Napier was getting so much flack from the college football world for the lack of competence at times that they put on the football field, Graham Mertz vastly improved under Billy Napier than where his previous stop was. Connor Weigman was one of the top quarterbacks coming out of high school. You know, it's not missed upon me that last year, midway through the season, the conversation about Connor Weigman before he got hurt was not only is he a good quarterback, is he one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC? Nationally, that conversation was being had. What does Taylor Green do at Arkansas with Bobby Petrino coming back? There are so many question marks, so many talking points at quarterback in this league and in this conference. And I've got to be real with you. I feel good where LSU sits with Garrett Nussmeier as their quarterback. Doesn't have experience like the others, has played a ton. And actually, if we're being honest, has been in a game, 2 games of recent note where there were a lot of things on the line when he entered the ball game. You know, LSU in the SEC championship game. Yeah, LSU under Brian Kelly has not played a bigger game, no matter what you want to believe. No bigger game that was more important than an SEC championship game. It's just not true. Now, you could say Bama maybe in 22 was the biggest because you beat them to win the West. I would digress if that would want to be your argument. But Garrett is one of the top dudes in this league. We've seen him grow up in front of our eyes, right? Like, I'm old enough to remember when a lot of you slandered me for saying that and I remember it vividly. You said that I did the same thing to Miles Brennan. Never did. Not like that. I said we got to wait and see. We were right. Garrett Nussmeier, when he went into a game against Southern, wasn't ready. In other games that we saw him, he wasn't ready. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with him not being ready to be the starting guy. sometimes it takes kids time to progress. Jaden Daniels comes to mind. Now, Jaden played a lot more, but Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, this place has shown you what giving a quarterback and player patience could benefit to you. But he's got the keys now. It is his offense to navigate. It is his team to navigate. And we have not gone into a season with him being QB1. Now, a lot of people in 22 didn't think Jaden was going to win that game or win that job. You were kidding yourselves if you thought he wasn't. Always told you were. Garrett, from where he started to where he is now, I think is the biggest deal. Because when you go back and look at the 5 games that Garrett played in, the last 5 that he played at LSU, you know, the bowl game 2 years ago when he split time with Jaden Daniels was 11 for 15, had a 73% completion percentage, did throw a bad pick, is what it is, 173 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. He comes in the game before that against Georgia in an SEC championship game, goes 15 of 27. That has to get better. It will. It has. For 294, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Remember that I said this. Only had 1 sack in that game, or in that half, did Georgia. Army, he was 7 for 12. 89 yards and a touchdown. Bama this past year when he came in, when Jaden Daniels got hit and concussed and the flag should have been called, Garrett comes in off the bench, 5 out of 10, 53 yards and 50% completion percentage. And then his first start against Wisconsin, he was 31 of 45, 395 yards, 68% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns and 1 pick. No sacks. The biggest thing and the biggest question that you have for a guy like Garrett Nussmeier always and will be, is he going to be a better overall quarterback in the sense of the small things that you have to do? You do not have to hit a bomb every single time. There is a lot of good in potentially getting the ball out, checking the ball down, getting the ball to your playmakers, and letting them go to work. There was also a big thing of Garrett not needing to stay so long in the pocket, get the ball out. Look, you're not going to out-athlete a lot of these dudes in this conference. Get the ball out. Don't take sacks. Limit turnovers. Guys, in the last 5 games that we've seen Garrett Nussmeier, he hasn't taken a sack. One of those were a start, and then pretty much a second half versus Alabama, who had 2 really premier pass rushers a year ago. But now that same O-line is still there and you are just reloading at that position group, you've got a really good offensive line. You hope that running game really gets rolling this year behind a really good running back to even take more pressure off Garrett, who will be a first-time starter. Doesn't mean that he won't get the job done for you this season at all. But offensively, you have a lot that you have to replace. Again, guys, you legitimately are losing 2 first-round wide receivers. I actually believe, personally, that you've reloaded there. You've heard me last week. I think that you reloaded there. Don't worry about you got talent on the outside. I am not worried about that. But it is a question mark. How do you replenish? Because I could be wrong. Garrett's got a lot of toys to play with. And going into this season, for me, without question, and I know this is going to be the answer that, Blake's just bailing himself out. There is no player on this team that is more critical than him. Nobody. On how your season wants to go. if he comes out and does a lot of the same things that you saw against Wisconsin, you start saying to yourself, this kid might have a chance. He's going to throw interceptions. He's going to take losses. How much can he mitigate that? How much can he take a step back and say, you know what, man? It's first down. I'm not going to force this into double coverage because we come back in 2nd and 10 and we are behind the best offensive line. Caleb Jackson is to my right. That is going to be the biggest thing for him because the season, the season rides on every quarterback that you have, but you are replacing a lot of things that Jayden Daniels covered up for a year ago. Guys, I will remind you that last year during Ole Miss and Missouri, even in the beginning games against Alabama, of the last 30 drives that Jayden Daniels, or the midway through the season, let me say this again. Midway through the season, when you're playing Missouri, who was a 10-win team, Ole Miss that was a 10-win team, and Alabama that won the conference, 25 of the last 30 possessions in that time frame, Jayden was 25 of 30 in scoring touchdowns. Now, I will say that he had to do it, like Blake, he was a Heisman Trophy winner. Of course he did. Guys, that is ridiculous. That is utterly ridiculous. I think Garrett can do not the same thing that Jayden did, but there is one thing that they do have in common. The thing that they have in common is that they're very much impact players. They have a very, 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 very high ceiling. You got to raise their floor. Because if Garrett Nussmeier's floor is 2-3 touchdowns, 275 to 300 yards, and you ran the football, if that is his floor, 300, 3-1, guys, you're going to be cooking again. And he has that ability. He has that ability to do it. You saw it against Wisconsin. You've seen it against Georgia. You've seen it against Purdue. Now, Georgia was obviously the best of those teams, and he had a pair of first-round wide receivers that are around him. It really helped him. No doubt whatsoever. Offensive line, both of your tackles were freshmen in his the premier time that he was here. He is the most critical because I know that he's a first-year starter, but how he progresses is going to be what you ride on offensively. Before we go into the season, I want to say this about him because things are going to be said from Thursday to the beginning of the season about how he looks. I could be wrong in this. I don't think he's going to be a Heisman contender. I don't know that. I haven't seen him. I don't know if he's going to be a Heisman contender. But he's going to be good. He's going to be good enough for you. He's not going to Max Johnson this thing. He will not do that. Raise the floor level, and you got yourself a dude. Let's talk about the room as a whole. I made some phone calls last week because Rickie Collins won the Freak of the Week. Pause. The Freak of the Week is what LSU calls a guy that's had the best week or best couple of weeks or best period of not only lifting, but being a leader, being a good teammate, doing stuff off the field, conditioning. Rickie Collins won it? Okay. What what has Rickie done that where of 105 players that are lifting and working out and are there with you, what did Rickie do that stood out to you? Can Rickie have a big offseason? That is going to be the question mark. Coming out of spring, I thought that A.J. Swan was going to be your number 2 quarterback. But now as we sit here today, I ask myself, is Rickie Collins not number 2? And has he not separated himself? And if he has separated himself, what does that progression look like under Brian Kelly? Stay with me. Guys, I think the biggest thing that gets missed when people talk about Garrett Nussmeier is that Brian Kelly and Joe Sloan were the guys that were here when that development started. You and I cannot say to anybody, or nobody in the college football world can say that they have not seen development from Garrett from playing as a freshman until right now. No one. No one. You've seen the transformation. Is Rickie Collins in that? Is Rickie Collins in that? Because if he is, guys, I mean, I know that you have Bryce Underwood that is coming in, but if you have a guy that is still taking that next step, we got to have a conversation of, hey, man, since Brian Kelly has been here, you saw Garrett transform. He's looking really good. And now Rickie Collins is kind of like, oh, shit. Oh, shit. Bro, that's Rickie. We will find that out starting on Thursday. Can he take that next step? But you have a young room with not a lot of experience. That's why you bring in A.J. Swan, because Rickie hasn't seen that experience. Guys, what have we seen from Swan? Guys, I mean, if he can be serviceable at Vandy, I know that A.J. Swan had a very tough spring. Very tough spring. But I question, like, how, I mean, because he committed to LSU and was thrown in the fire. Didn't get any prep work, none of it. Didn't know any plays, didn't know anybody. I remember when that happened to Jaden Daniels. And then he had a summer, and I'm like, Sure it did. I think you got talent. I think you have guys with traits. Outside of Nuss, I don't know if you have somebody in that room that can be transcendent or be above average. I don't know that. I do personally, my opinion would be, yes, Rickie Collins could be because of his athleticism and be more than serviceable. But I don't know that because I have not seen Rickie in significant snaps ever. Okay, I've seen him in practice. I've seen him in spring games. You know, like I think of during spring when they were doing 11 on 11 at practice, and Rickie Collins took a shot and hit Shelton Sampson in the back of the end zone. One of the only plays Shelton Sampson made all spring. And it was a dime to Shelton Sampson in the back of the end zone, put it right in his breadbasket. So I look at that room and say, yeah, you got some traits. If Nuss goes down, guys, I got to be honest, I have no idea what's going to happen there. I go into this offseason saying, look, I think Rickie will be ultimately better than A.J. Swan just based off what we've seen. But, man, Swan has a lot of attempts. He has a lot of throws in this conference, and I think that means something. So you have two backups, I would say 2A and 2B, that give or take what you would do until Nussmeier would get back, if he got back. God forbid. Last but not least, Colin Hurley. Guys, I think outside of Garrett Nussmeier, I told you this all spring when I got to see Colin Hurley up close and personal. And it's not close. The 17-year-old quarterback, Colin Hurley, is the second best pure thrower of the football on this team. Not remotely close. I think that him and Nuss are stratospheres above everybody else. Rickie's got some things he's got to work out there. Colin Hurley, guys, looks like a shortstop. Looks like the guy that is the slick second baseman that you see in the league. Right? Like just a good defender at second, rangy, big arm, kind of a, shorter guy. Dude is athletic in the pocket. He's 17. And if Colin Hurley is playing significant snaps at LSU next year, we're in big trouble. Very big trouble. So look, I think that there is a potential that your quarterback room is going to be something that we need to keep our eyes on, even with Nuss, but what's behind him. I can't talk about quarterback, though, without obviously bringing up Bryce Underwood. I mean, you would hope that Nuss comes back next year, I have no idea what you're going to do when Bryce gets here. And could a Colin Hurley leave now that you can transfer out twice? Does A.J. Swan leave? Does Rickie leave? I mean, guys, Rickie's going to be a junior when Bryce Underwood comes in. A.J. Swan's not getting younger. Are those guys going to want to play somewhere? So, yeah, you would have a Bryce Underwood coming in. He might have to start out of necessity unless you went and got somebody out of the portal. Just saying. So that's it. I think Nuss is going to have a good season. I do think that he's going to show signs of being a first-time quarterback. And I think we're going to have to get over it in growing pains.